What if the deepest lie you ever believed wasn't that you failed, but that you were born wrong? What if the part of you you've spent years trying to fix was never broken at all? You grew up inside that invisible lie. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't written down, but it was there, stitched into every silence, every sideways glance, every unspoken expectation. Something about you was too much, too sensitive, too chaotic, too alive, so you adjusted, you clipped your wings. You learned the art of shrinking yourself into something acceptable. You thought if you could just smooth the roughness, master the rules, perfect the performance, then the ache inside would finally ease. You bought the books, you chased the breakthroughs, you swallowed the mantras, you wore the polished mask so tightly it almost felt like skin. And yet, somewhere, in the quiet moments when nobody was watching, you still heard it, the whisper. You're not doing it right. But what if the whisper was wrong? Carl Jung taught that healing doesn't come from polishing the surface. It comes from remembering what's buried beneath it. You were not designed to be a project. You were not born a mistake waiting to be corrected. You were born a soul waiting to be seen. The ache you carry isn't proof you're defective. It's proof you're still alive enough to feel the distance between who you are and who you were taught to be. This journey, the one you think begins with fixing, actually begins with remembering, and sometimes remembering starts the moment you stop running. It's a strange kind of loneliness, to be admired for the mask you wear. They like you, they compliment you, they praise how composed you seem, how polished you sound, and inside you shrink a little smaller, because they're not clapping for you, they're clapping for the version of you that never truly existed. And the more they praise, the more invisible you feel. You wonder if it's your fault. Maybe you're too fragile. Maybe you just need to toughen up, get better at being what they want. Maybe you're the glitch. That's what the world teaches those high in sensitivity and depth, in neuroticism, that their very wiring is defective, that the emotions they feel too deeply are problems to be medicated, corrected, outgrown. But the truth is quieter than that, and far more dangerous. Your feelings were never the problem. The problem was the shame you learned to attach to them. The problem was believing that anxiety made you broken, that doubt made you weak, that sadness made you less. You weren't flawed for feeling deeply. You were wounded for being told not to. And so you turned to self-help like a drowning man clutches driftwood. Another book, another practice, another system, each promising transformation. But transformation isn't what your soul was begging for. It was begging for recognition. It was begging for someone, maybe you, to finally say, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be found. Carl Jung warned us that neurosis isn't madness. It's the suffering of a soul forced to live against itself. And every step you've taken trying to perfect yourself was another step away from the home you never really left. You are not a flaw to manage. You are not a project to complete. You are a presence waiting to be remembered, a truth waiting to be reclaimed. And the real tragedy isn't that you felt too much, it's that you believed you had to apologize for it. At first it feels like hope, the checklists, the morning routines, the endless strategies for leveling up, healing faster, becoming the best version of yourself. You tell yourself it's working. You feel the small victories, the surge of control, the pride of building a better you, but beneath it all something heavier grows, a quiet panic. Because no matter how many books you read, how many habits you optimize, how many toxic thoughts you erase, that hollow feeling never fully disappears. It waits, it watches, it reminds you, in the spaces between your accomplishments, that no matter how high you climb, you still feel strangely unseen. You weren't chasing healing, you were chasing permission. The permission to exist without having to earn it. The permission to finally be enough, even if you failed, even if you felt afraid, even if you weren't extraordinary. But the self-help spiral has a gravity of its own. And slowly, without meaning to, you build a cage out of your own improvement. Every new system, every new practice, another bar on the prison of conditional self-worth. You don't notice when hope hardens into exhaustion, when chasing healing becomes its own wound, when trying to fix yourself becomes the very thing tearing you apart. And then, one day, you crash. Not the kind of crash that screams for help, the kind that sinks in quietly like a house settling into its own ruins. You realize you can't win this game. You realize there's no arrival point where the critic in your head will finally say, now you're good enough, because that critic doesn't want you healed. It wants you obedient. Carl Jung once wrote that neurosis is the substitute for legitimate suffering, and when you finally stop running, you meet that suffering face to face. It's not the pain of being broken, it's the ancient grief of abandoning yourself. And paradoxically, collapse becomes the doorway you've been searching for. Because only when the performance crumbles do you finally glimpse the person underneath. Not better, not fixed, just real. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel like defeat, but revelation. The silence that follows collapse isn't empty, it's full. Full of the parts of you you try to outrun. You sit there, stripped of the mask, stripped of the striving. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you hear them, the voice that's been screaming beneath your ambition. The smallness you buried under bravado, the sadness you locked away in your rush to seem strong. They are not enemies, they are not defects. They are parts of you that once carried too much pain to be allowed to stay visible. And now, in this silence, they return. Not to sabotage you, but to come home. Jung called this the beginning of individuation. The quiet discovery that you are not a monolith, but a constellation. That your so-called flaws, your hidden fears, your old wounds, they are not obstacles to be crushed, but sacred pieces of your whole. Modern therapy is finally catching up to what Jung knew. You are not one self, you are many, and none of them deserve exile. The anxious voice, it kept you alert when no one else protected you. The angry outburst, it spoke the truth you weren't allowed to say. The exhausted numbness, it shielded you when feeling would have broken you open. They weren't weaknesses, they were your first survival strategies. You don't heal by erasing them. You heal by seeing them clearly and choosing to love them anyway. This is not the glamorous kind of healing. It won't win you trophies, it won't earn you applause, but it will do something far greater. It will bring you back to yourself, the self that was never missing, only forgotten, and in that remembering, the war inside you begins to end. The world will tell you that you are a problem to be solved. It will hand you formulas for success, templates for healing, blueprints for happiness, as if your soul were a spreadsheet that just needed better management. It will praise your growth when it looks like performance. It will celebrate your healing when it fits neatly into the shape of marketable success. But somewhere in that endless cycle of striving and optimizing, a deeper ache takes root. Not because you're lazy, not because you're failing, but because you were never meant to live as a renovation project. There's a violence in the idea that your worth must be earned and that your existence needs to be justified through constant becoming. And the worst violence is when you turn that idea inward, when you become your own taskmaster, measuring every breath against an imaginary standard called good enough. You can spend your whole life upgrading the mask and never once touch the face beneath it. You can master the art of appearing whole while secretly bleeding behind the curtains. Carl Jung understood this trap before the self-help industry had a name. He warned that wholeness does not come from perfecting your persona. It comes from descending into yourself and gathering the lost, wounded, beautiful parts you were taught to abandon. It comes from reclaiming the wholeness you already are, not by achievement, but by remembrance. The old stories knew this long before psychology did. The Selkie in the ancient Celtic myth was not a woman who became something new. She was a creature who had her true skin stolen. She lived on land. She smiled, she mothered, she adapted. But inside she was always aching for the home she could not name. It was only when she found her hidden skin, the forgotten symbol of her true being, that she remembered. And in remembering, she returned. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need another certificate, another milestone, another badge of self-worth. You need to find your own skin again, the original untamed sacred self that existed before the world taught you to perform your way into acceptance. You are not a project, you are a soul, and the soul doesn't ask to be improved, it only asks to be reclaimed. There is a moment when the striving quiets, when the hunger for more dissolves into a softer, stranger hunger, not for achievement, but for authenticity. It doesn't happen in a flash of triumph. It happens in the small, ordinary silences of When you no longer feel the need to outrun yourself, you notice it when you laugh and don't immediately scan the room for approval. When you cry and don't apologize for the mess. When you speak and don't rehearse your worth in your head before the words leave your mouth. This is the unglamorous miracle of returning to yourself. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process by which the fragmented parts of you reweave themselves into something whole, not something perfect, something real. You realize then that you were never a problem to solve. You were never a glitch in the system. You were a soul carrying too many forgotten names, too many abandoned dreams, too many exiled voices, and now one by one you are gathering them back into your arms, not to perfect them, not to polish them, but to finally say, you are part of me, you always were. This is what healing actually feels like. Not a grand ceremony, not a shiny new identity, but a slow, sacred remembering. You don't need to level up. You don't need to win the race, you only need to come home, and home isn't a place you reach by becoming someone better. Home is the place you find when you dare to believe you were enough all along. The world will keep offering you ways to fix yourself. It will keep telling you that wholeness is something you can buy, earn, manifest. But you know now that the real work is quieter, more radical. The real work is seeing yourself, the whole, wounded, glorious self, and refusing to look away. So the question now is not how will you fix yourself, it's will you dare to remember? Will you dare to stay when the noise demands you disappear? Will you dare to hold your own soul, scars and all, without apology? You were never lost, you were never broken. You were only waiting for someone, maybe you, to find the way back. And now you have.